Hi everybody, Cheryl and Lady coming to you from the Ladies Garden and Home. Today I'm going to be going through the garden and sort of ticking off in my head everything that I need to get started to put the garden to bed. We still have plenty of life here, but it's time to pull some of the old plants and plant some new for the winter. So I hope you join us. This week is supposed to be our first frost date average. However, I have checked the 10-day forecast, and it looks like we're going to have nights in the 40s, days in the 60s and 50s. So hopefully we still have some life left in the summer part of the garden. I absolutely love this time of year in the garden. Here in my Zone 7A, Southwest Connecticut backyard. I was about to say farm. It's really a rather small plot, as you can see. Say hi, lady. You look like a little flower. Anyway, the bounty is amazing. Vegetables are still coming in. The peppers are going strong. The tomatoes are going strong. But some things have to be pulled. For example, this was my attempt of trying to remove the sunflowers. So I think it's going to need some strength on my part. But I also noticed something as I was pulling these up, and that is the soil is really very poor. And this is a new bed. I had just put it in last year. Maybe this is the second year with it. And I don't think that the nutrition in the soil is very good. So I'm surprised actually that the sunflowers did as well as they did back in August. So I'm going to lift these big stalks out, and I'm going to hopefully use them next year maybe as pole beans supports, or if that doesn't work out, I'm going to probably burn them in the fire pit. But to amend this soil here, I've got some good potting mix that I had made, that I've been collecting in this bucket. I'm going to dump that in there. I'm going to put a good layer of compost. I just got my shipment of compost in. And then I'm going to plant some fava beans. And there's a few reasons why. One, they overwinter great. I have grown them through the winter before. They give you a very first early harvest of vegetables in early spring. And also, because they're beans, they're good nitrogen fixers, and they're very good for the soil. So I'm going to plant these after I amend that bed. We'll have a nice bean harvest sometime in the spring. Also, as part of my fall cleanup, I guess you would call it, I finished laying down all the cardboard that I'm using to kill off the crabgrass underneath it. And next spring, early April or so, I'm going to be planting some white clover. White clover is also a very good nitrogen fixer for the soil, but it's a great alternative to lawn and mowing. The bees absolutely love them. It's one of the first flowers that bloom in the spring. And I have to say that I've noticed a growing trend of naturalizing your lawn. It's not just for maintenance, it's also very good for the environment. It's good for the birds, it's good for the bees. And we have quite a bit of it already naturalized back here. And when it does get a little long, you know, I just weed whack it. Most of the green beans in this bed here are doing very well still. I'm still picking a bunch of beans every couple of days. What I think I'm going to do also to improve the soil here is I'm going to leave the green beans and the corn that's left over here on top of the soil, and I'm not going to remove the roots of the green beans. because that's how they fix the nitrogen. The roots have to be left in place. So that's what I'm going to do with this bed. This is my magnificent fig named Sue. And what I'm going to do with her, I had to look it up because I've never grown a fig tree before. This one's not going to be hardy in my zone. Again, I'm 7A. It wouldn't make it if I just left it outside. I could wrap it in burlap. I think if it was more established and not in a pot, I would do that. But since it is in a pot, I'm going to wait for it to drop its leaves, you know, naturally because it's the fall and all, and just bring it inside and keep it in the basement. Apparently, they do need a dormant period of about 100 days. So I'll keep that in the basement. And then, you know, when the weather warms up, I'll bring her back out. So another thing I'm going to do pretty soon is I'm going to cut down the eggplant. Now, I had left them in because I had seen some flowers, but I noticed that the flowers really aren't forming, and I know that we don't have enough time for an eggplant to develop. So I think I'm just going to clear out this space. The carrots are going strong. I have been harvesting them every now and then. What I'm going to do when the carrots are done is I'm going to plant the leeks that I had started as seedlings. Leeks take a very long time to grow, and I'm going to overwinter them in this bed towards the north end of the bed so that as they get taller, they won't block out anything that I want to grow here in the spring. And here I'm going to be planting a cover crop. And the cover crop that I'm going to plant here is actually a mixture. I got this from True Leaf Market last year. I think I need to order some more. I don't want to wait too long, though. I want these to have a chance to germinate before the freeze. It's really just a mixture of winter wheat, peas, some daikon radish, some Harry vetch, some clover, and then they'll either die back in the winter during the freeze, and I'm just going to leave them on the soil to create some nice biology there in the spring. Or if they're still growing, when I want to clear the bed, I'm going to just cut them off and let the roots be inside the ground, and then use it as a nice green manure, which is another way for saying chop and drop, or just leave it where it drops. I am really quite pleased with how well things are growing in this bed here, considering it gets a couple of hours of shade every day, but gets full sun morning and evening. I think it's a really, really good environment, little micro environment for my backyard garden. And as you can see, the tomatoes are ripening. So I'm going to leave these here, but when they are done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them off at the base, leave the roots in, and remove the tall poles here, and then I'm going to cover these with a frost cloth as it gets cooler, and then later, as it's really freezing, I'm going to cover them with plastic row cover that I have. And I'm going to do that to let them overwinter, keep the celery alive. They'll go through quite a dormant period, but I've got broccoli in here. I've got purple sprouting broccoli. I've got Romanesco, which takes quite a long time. I even have what I think is a volunteer leek. And the carrots are still growing, so we're going to let them be until they're mature. But we've got Brussels sprouts in here as well. So if I don't get a harvest by December or so, when the real freeze comes, I'm just going to cover them and let them grow through the winter. Unfortunately, that's not going to work with the tomatoes or the zinnias or the marigolds or the basil. I know I'm always saying that I'll cut the plant off at the base and leave the roots in, and the reason we do that is because the roots decompose, and then, you know, just put some nutrition into the soil, especially since the roots is where they absorb most of the nutrients from the soil. However, when it comes to a plant like this, which This basil was doing great. Actually, all of the basil was doing really, really great until we got colder, and we had about 4 days of rain when Hurricane Ian came through here. And I don't know if this is a disease or if it was caused by bugs, but since I'm not sure what it is, I'm just going to pull the whole plant, roots and all. I'm not going to put it in my compost pile. I'm not going to mulch with it. I am going to just put it in a trash bag and throw it away and get it out of the garden, because if it is a disease, it could spread in the compost pile, and it would certainly spread if I left it on the top of the soil. Also, these were the cucumbers, and if you remember, the cucumbers had a pretty bad fungus, and I am not only going to rip them out by the roots, but I'm not going to plant cucumbers in this space next year either. The cattle panel were great. The fungus really, though, I think affected the production of the cucumbers, which was very disappointing. You know, I got a couple, but I certainly didn't get the kind of quantity that I have in the past. The rest of the in-ground plants, as they die back, like the zinnia and the marigold, and I clear them out, I'll amend the soil with an inch or two of compost. Flower pots like the pansies and the roses that will overwinter, and I'm going to wrap them with some bubble wrap and put them up against the house. And I'm going to try to do the same thing with the artichoke, which has not bloomed yet. I understand it's perennial in zones that are just a little bit higher than mine. So I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to wrap it with bubble wrap, put it close to the house, and hopefully it'll make it through the winter and have a nice strong root system, and it'll be ready to go in the spring. Coming up to the deck, what I spent today doing is I cleared out all of the marigolds, I removed all the mulch, and then I transplanted the kale. We have red Russian, we've got lacinato, we've got some scarlet, and then what I planted in the other containers was this giant winter spinach. I planted this last year. It did go through the winter. So what I really like about having leafy greens up on the deck here is that I'm not bending over to harvest, and I can keep an eye on them, but it's not so much of a chore when it's time to pick some leaves. And then here at the green stalk, I have some basil that'll be coming out pretty soon as we start getting some frosts. And what I've done is I've planted some spinach. There's chard in here, and I'm going to plant more of the giant winter spinach in here probably tomorrow, and just make sure that the spots that are empty or will be emptied is going to be filled up with something else throughout the winter. Here in the mini greenhouse that I just disassembled and made kind of a potting bench over the summer, those are the lettuce over there. I still have a couple of plants to get in the ground before the really cold weather sets in, and those are the leeks, which I told you about. I'm going to put them where the carrots and the eggplant were. And then we've got some broccoli rabe and also some Brussels sprouts. So I have to figure out where I'm going to plant those, but I will do that within the next couple of days. And that being said, it's time, or it will be time soon, to reassemble the greenhouse so that I can overwinter a couple of more of the tender things inside it. And then finally, what I have usually planted by now is my garlic. But since we've got a stretch of weather that's been actually quite mild, I mean, it's been chilly, like fall weather, but it's not been frosts yet. I'm going to plant these probably right before we get our first frost. The problem with planting the garlic last time was that I planted them in September. They all sprouted, but they didn't give enough energy to the roots, and I think that's why I got pretty small bulbs. Speaking of small bulbs, apparently I forgot to harvest a clove, but I wanted to show you what it looks like. It did grow into a clove, as you can see, and it's sprouting from each clove. So I'm going to separate that out, and I'm going to plant that, and hopefully that'll turn into a couple more cloves like this. And when I plant the garlic, I'll bring you along. Well, today was an absolutely beautiful day, perfect autumn day, and I hope you're enjoying your fall as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. Please subscribe and hit the alert bell. And if you want to see how I overwintered vegetables last year, I'm going to link that video next. So I hope you watch it, and I hope you join us again later. And from the Ladies Garden and Home, enjoy your gardening journey. Bye!